right, good morning. I need y'all to do me a favor before I get going today. All right, if all y'all will take your non-dominant hand, put it out in front of you about foot out. Take your dominant hand from your mouth to the other hand. Now, put that non-dominant in the crook of your elbow. Push the sun up over the horizon. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. I feel better now. All right. It's kind of funny getting ready for this, and this whole week I've been feeling a little anxious, and I just could not quite place why I was feeling so nervous about being in front of a group of, I'd probably guess, where we have about 150 or so, some odd sets of eyes today. And I could not quite place why I was feeling anxious about it. I've been doing this for about 13 years now, and I've been in front of tens of thousands of people. I've been with diplomats. I've been, you name it, I've been in front of very large crowds. And finally last night it dawned on me the reason why I was feeling anxious is it's never been my words. It's always been someone else's words that I was in charge of. And I never had to be the one to build the rapport with the audience, to foster those connections. And I recognized that that was kind of where my anxiety was lying. So I hope y'all will be very kind to me today. I'm not used to having to speak for myself. So anyways, really excited to be here, and I hope y'all enjoy this today. In preparing for today, I went ahead and read over what are some of the other speakers talking about. There's, 130 of these going on this month. And so I looked at all the languages and or the language speakers and what they're talking about, and really we can all recognize how many forms of language there are out there. Of course, written and spoken language is traditionally what we think of when we hear the word language. But if you think about it, we've got the language of love. Who didn't love this, right? We have computer language. I will not pretend to know anything about that. We have the language of flowers, which is this really fascinating Victorian language of communicating back in the day. It's pretty cool. We also have sign language, or in my case, sign language. So today I could talk about ASL linguistics and get super nerdy and go down this rabbit hole and bore y'all for the next 20 minutes. But what I'm interested in is how all of us here are interpreters. Yes, I'm an interpreter by profession, but every day y'all are interpreting your interactions amongst people. And I really just kind of want to talk about that today, how that aligns with the profession of interpreting, and what that means for us going forward. So that's kind of really what I want to focus on today. Are we there? Okay, the laughter's getting there. Misinterpretations happen all the time. Can y'all see it? Do I need to read it? So one guy says, "Hey man, where are you going?" Their guy says, "Sorry dude, gotta go feed my baby turtles." Their guy says, "Well, how cute, can I watch?" The man says, "Yeah, sure." And then he has his baby and he's feeding it turtles. Anyways, language is a funny thing. I've been dying to work this into a workshop or a presentation for years. I'm not gonna lie, so I really appreciate the opportunity to put that out there. So, how true is this today? How many of you have misinterpreted a text message? How many of y'all have gotten in a fight because of an email? Yeah. My poor boyfriend, who I love and adore, is here supporting me this morning. I cannot tell you how often he'll send me a text and I'll respond and say, "I don't understand, I need emojis." I don't understand. And it's fascinating to look at the way our language is changing and the way we interact with people. We're going from face-to-face interactions with people and we're moving to behind screen. And it's really changing the way we interact, and it's really causing us to overinterpret a lot. And so part of the reason why we're seeing that is, depending on the research that you see, studies show that anywhere from 50 to 90% of language is actually nonverbal. So that means your facial expression, that means your tone. So you can imagine those text messages, we're causing a little bit of a mess there. We're lacking in our communication, and it's really a severe impact on the way we interact with people. So as you can imagine, interpreting, especially as an ASL interpreter, I'm sure a lot of y'all are having fun watching the interpreters this morning, they're very animated. That's because within the deaf community, there's no tone. I have to put it here on my face. And so you oftentimes see interpreters are very animated, and it's part of their job, and it's fun. It's really fun. Anyways, so we have this weird phenomenon of our language is losing a lot of those other subtle layers of what we're communicating. At the same time, we're getting away from language altogether. I don't need to write anything. I'm just going to post pictures about what I'm doing. I'm going to let you interpret how amazing I am. I'm going to let you interpret that, oh, look at her sitting on that cliff overlooking the canyon. She must be so serene. You know, we're seeing that a lot today, and it's fascinating. I'm sure you all have heard about the studies happening about how today's generation is far more depressed than any generations before, and it's because they're seeing what people are putting out there, but they're not actually seeing the real person. And I just think it's fascinating the way that's impacting us and the way we use language, whether it be visual or written. So along those same lines, and I just think it's hilarious, there's this weird trend on Tinder where men like to post pictures of themselves with tigers. And it's this really bizarre thing. And I think it's so funny that not only are our communications with one another becoming stunted, we are outsourcing our dating life to apps like Tinder. And it's all visual. There's hardly any language there. And we say, this dude with a tiger must be pretty adventurous. I think I need to go out with him. And it's just incredible to see the way that is impacting what we do. And, you know, I have friends these days that they have their dating app no-nos. You have a bathroom selfie? You have a duck face? No, thank you. You know, and we have to come up with that. And I think it's so interesting that we're pulling away from meeting people in a natural way and interacting with them in person. It makes me a little sad. So, just going along the trends of language and how it's changing, we're seeing a real globalization of language now. And you can look back in the last 30, 40 years, English has become the currency of linguistics. And when you look across the world, English is the language you have to have. How many of you are travelers? Okay. Give me a suitcase, I'll go tomorrow, I don't care. Like, just take me somewhere. How many of you, when you travel, are willing to admit you're American? Impressed, I saw a few hands. I do not. I hate admitting American. Canadian, eh? I won't admit I'm American because there's such a stigma about the kind of people we are, the self-absorbed people we are, the narcissism that's rampant in our society, and our laziness. I've gone to so many different countries. I spent some time in Austria, and every person I met there spoke 5 languages. I know English and ASL. Nice to meet you. It's just incredible to see what's that doing. Now, along those same lines, people often ask me, is American Sign Language universal? It's an interesting question. Sign language, as a phenomenon, is universal. There's not a culture or language out there that doesn't have a sign communication. American Sign Language itself is not universal. If I were to go to Britain, I couldn't use American Sign Language. We're both English-speaking countries. They have a totally different sign communication system. And so it's really fascinating to see that. It's also important to note that American Sign Language is recognized as a separate and dynamic language. It's not English on the hands. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So just globalization and the way we interact with the world around us, it's just, I'm going to spare y'all. So this is the UN. If you can see there on the left side, it looks like the box seats. It's like where all the VIPs sit, the UN. It's actually not the case. That's actually where all the interpreters sit. We finally get to be fancy. So something that's fascinating about the UN is really back in the 40s, whenever the UN came to be, that is really what launched interpreting as a profession to be recognized. The UN currently has 6 languages that they use. They are English, French, Spanish, Chinese, Russian, and Arabic. They are required for all their documents, all their meetings. That means every meeting they have has a minimum of 14 interpreters, which is a pretty phenomenal task to pull off. And what happens is all the interpreters sit in those booths, they wear their headsets, they have their little mic, and then they are listening to the source language, who the speaker is, speaking it into the mic, and then their clients and the audience have an ear set, and they're listening to it over the earpiece. Pretty incredible. If for some reason you come from a country whose language is not represented, you have to bring your own interpreter. There's a lot of bodies in this room that are doing some very hard work. The fascinating thing about interpreting too is it's mentally fatiguing. And that's spoken and sign language. A lot of people assume, oh, your arms must be so tired. Actually, no, my brain's a little tired. But there was an article recently that was really interesting. It was talking about one of the most difficult things to interpret is humor. And a lot of people assume that as an interpreter, you're there for language exchange, and that's all you do. We're actually cultural ambassadors. Not only are we having to convey language and the tone and all the nonverbals, we're there to build rapport. There's a real relational undercurrent to what we do. And you are there as the interlocutor trying to unite these people. And so when I was in Austria, I spent some time there doing research, and I had a chance to spend some time at the UN, which was pretty incredible. And I met an interpreter there, and we got to talking about humor and just the nuances. It's hard enough to understand one another in the same language. Make sure, did you get my dry humor? I'm being sarcastic, you okay? But then to try to switch that into another language, there's not always a one-to-one correlation. And so I was speaking with this interpreter, and she was working, I want to say from Spanish to English. I can't remember what it was, but she was talking about how there was a joke being told by a diplomat, and there was just no good way to give a good equivalent for the English speakers in the house. But she recognized the importance of her job to keep that rapport, to keep that relationship there. And so what she ended up doing was, the diplomat is currently telling a humorous cultural story about a donkey and a rooster. Laugh now. And it was so important, and that was such an amazing choice to make. I know it sounds crazy, but that is an amazing choice to make. And what she did just a beautiful job of maintaining that relationship, and that was so important. And I love to see those little things like that. Ideally, you'd want to figure out how to make a good parallel. It's just not always possible. If you look at language globally, it's really fascinating to see the way other languages use slang. Just like in English, we have all this weird slang. I'm not even going to try to come up with some off the top of my head. American Sign Language has slang. Trying to find the parallel, how to draw that is a little tough sometimes. But I don't know if y'all saw this article. Just recently came out maybe 2 months ago, talking about Norway. I see a head shaking. He knows what I'm talking about. I see some more. Awesome. So fun fact. In Norway, the word Texas is slang for like wild or crazy. So, man, that party last night was totally Texas. I thought, yeah, I'm proud to be from here. That's right. I just thought that was funny, and I'm a little sad that I didn't say it when I wanted to. Anyways, language is funny, and I love the way we connect with people using language. Are there any people who know other languages here? Handful? How's your proficiency? Yeah. Yeah? Anyone know Spanglish? Yeah. Pretty going. It's interesting, just language is a funny thing. I had spent some time living in India. I was there for a little over a year, and was interpreting. Over there is a weird situation, interpreting for a deaf millionaire, that's a whole nother talk. And over there, English is commonly used, but people are not confident with it. And so I worked in an office. I was the only female of all men, and there were so many people in there who used English every day, but refused to speak to me. They were too scared to use their English with me. So they would write to me, beautiful prose. I would get these really nice notes, and I'd speak back to them in English, and they'd respond. It was a very interesting situation. But over there they have Hinglish, Hindi and English. And so you hear, I don't know Hindi, da-da-da-da-da, email, da-da-da-da-da-da. Very funny. And so I'm like, wow, they have Spanglish too. That's pretty cool. Does anyone recognize this gal? Few faces do. Lydia Callis, she was the interpreter for Mayor Bloomberg during Hurricane Sandy back in 2012. And she kind of blew up the internet. People were just tweeting and Facebooking and talking all about, have you seen his interpreter? She's so animated. Oh my gosh, I love it. Then there was all these people, she's so distracting. I really can't stand looking at that. And that kind of hurt my heart. She was doing her job. She was doing a fabulous job. And she had to match the tone and the severity and the urgency of the situation. And it was incredible. And she really launched what we do into the limelight. Perhaps y'all remember this guy. The fake interpreter at Nelson Mandela's funeral. That was very painful. I was in India whenever this happened, and I just remember worldwide the deaf community was just in outrage. And it was so sad to see the grief that was on people's hearts because they could not partake the way the rest of the world had been able to participate in that memorial for him. And it was just really sad. So fake interpreters, they suck. We don't like them. I encourage y'all not to be fake interpreters. So interpreting is this funny thing where, well, I'll let y'all read this. This side can see it, thank you. So you see a little family over here sitting at a booth that appears to be a restaurant, and they're signing, and these two little hearing ladies over to the side are saying, sign language is so beautiful. And then you see the dad signing, you have to poop right now. And the mom's like, this minute? I just think it's so hilarious. Something that we really run into is sign language interpreters, which I'm sure that, and I get it, oftentimes the hearing community, y'all's first exposure to sign language or deaf community is via an interpreter, probably at ACL or South by or some large-scale event like the fake interpreter. And we always get told, oh, what you do is so beautiful. Thank you, I appreciate it. I'm just there providing accessibility and I'm doing my job. What I would really love to see y'all do is go up to a deaf person and say, I just really love watching your language and I'm glad I could see it today. That means so much more. Because it's not about me. It's about making sure that this person has the equal access that y'all have, which is pretty cool. So I just think it's always funny, and I like that slide. And then, I don't know if y'all can see this one. So you have a little kid asking another kid, he says, it's really cool that you, what does it say? It's cool that you can sign. Is sign language the same as English? And he says, not really. And then you can see him, let me show you the difference. This is English, and it looks like he has some Play-Doh, and he's written out dragon in English. And then next to that, he says, this is sign language, and he has this 3D Play-Doh dragon. And it's true. That's really what sign language is. It's taking what is spoken and made it visual. For me, I oftentimes will find myself in situations where I cannot express myself in English any longer. I just do not have the right words. I have the right signs, which is cool, but that kind of sucks when I'm trying to talk to someone that doesn't know sign language. It's not very helpful. And it's so interesting in this particular field, just the things that happen. Like I said, people usually see interpreters because of a large-scale musical event, which is funny because that's a very teeny tiny % of what we do. I actually personally, I specialize in a few things. One is mental health. I specialize in like government legislative stuff. And I have specialized in media. So the funny thing about mental health interpreting is it's very nuanced. Anything mental health related, especially if you're with like a psychiatrist or something, you have to be very in tune with that person's background and what they're going through. Let me tell you, there's nothing more interesting than trying to ask a deaf person, do you hear voices? Well, no, I'm deaf. It's just, we end up with these really bizarre situations where we have to find an equivalent. And it's an incredible process of how to make sure that that is understood for what it is, not just the English space. A funny thing, for example, the word run actually has like 12 or 13 different signs because it's all about the meaning behind the word. So we look at the meaning, not the literal word whenever we're interpreting. So sometimes it gets really interesting. Now, even though I specialize in those things, I do everything under the sun. I'll find myself in situations that are really weird where the deaf client and the hearing client know exactly what they're talking about, and I have no idea. I did this really cool year-long project with NASA, and it was awesome. It was super fun. I had no idea what they were talking about. And every day, I'd finish the assignment, write myself some notes, go home and have to research. I'm like, oh, that's what space junk is. I get it now. Really funny thing. And so because of that, we sometimes end up misinterpreting. I wish I could claim this story as my own, but I can't. I had a good friend of mine who was an interpreter. This was many, many years ago. And she got a call from an agency, and it was saying, I need you to sub tonight for a university class. Are you available? Yeah, sure, no problem. Great, the class is called Sex and Religion. Cool, I'll be there. Shows up, she's interpreting, doing her thing. About an hour into the course, a deaf student raises her hand, and she signs, my interpreter is obsessed with sex. So her job is to voice it. She voices it to the professor. Professor looks at her and is like, young lady, do you know what this class is? Well, yeah, sex and religion. S-E-C-T-S, sects and religion. And she had spent an hour making sense out of what the professor was saying in a sexual nature. And so I assure you that even the professionals, we end up misinterpreting things sometimes. And yeah, I wish I could claim that was my own story, but it's not. Can y'all see what this is? Feel bad for peeling back. It says extreme interpreting. It has an interpreter like hooked up to a rock climbing gear is interpreting. In heels, of course. I'm not gonna lie, I've done some extreme interpreting in my time. Back of a horse, back of a camel, back of an elephant, a surfboard, in a shark diving tank, top of a trapeze platform, in an autopsy. I've done underground counterculture clubs that are illegal. I've done some extreme interpreting in my time. However, the most extreme interpreting I do is my day-to-day interactions with people. It's what I do whenever I communicate with others, and really trying to make sure that what I'm putting out there is what I mean and that they're understanding. And so I just really want you to take it to heart. What are you putting out there? Unplug, have some FaceTime with people, make sure there's no misinterpretations. That's all I got.